Yeah, Mr. Clerk.
Yep, there you go.
All right, well, good afternoon. And welcome to the November 20th, 2025 meeting of the Climate Action and Sustainability Committee. You kindly call it?
Yes, Councilmember Burt. Here. Chair Vinker,
Here.
Councilmember Lou. Here. For the record, we have quorum.
Excellent, thank you so much. And do we have any requests to speak for public comment for items not on the agenda, but within the purview of the Climate Action Committee?
Yes, through the chair, I have received 2 requests to speak at the moment. So at the moment, I would like to invite David S. To the mic, and you can press the button right there.
Right, you use this microphone and use that one.
Right here.
Yes, I always feel uncomfortable talking to the back of people's heads. And
Well, I think your committee can see you, so.
right, I just wanted to be sure that the staff was able to as well, because.
Well, I think that seat is taken, so.
I
Oh, you want to go at the very end? I
thought, but I don't want to be difficult, I just, it was just about you.
That's fine. I thought you
wanted to
meant
be
that one.
I wanted to be respectful,
Go ahead.
all the way to the end. Thank you
That's
so
the
much.
preference,
Yeah.
because I assume the audio works, Mr. Clerk, yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
And thanks to everybody for being here. You understand that I feel like you guys are part of my government as well as these guys. And I appreciate especially.
So welcome, if you could kindly sit down and put the
Whatever you-
microphone on so that we can record, so that people remotely can hear. Yeah, so press
Did this.
the center button will turn red and your mic will turn on.
It's red now. I was too gentle.
Okay, now your time will start. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I apologize for the difficulties at the outset. So in the beginning, I want to thank everybody for being here. And at this moment, I'm feeling especially grateful to our staff, because this morning I apparently resolved my own personal narrow difficulty that was giving rise to my appearance here today. But I decided to come down here anyway, because my difficulty is part of a bigger picture. And I thought that I wanted you to hear about the bigger picture and the staff to hear about the bigger picture, because I'm confident that somebody wants to do something about it. So our goal here, carbon neutrality. The element I want to talk about is private auto electrification. The particular action item is R1 EV chargers. And my concern is about bringing power from homes to detached garages, carports, etc. And the project is at 391 Oxford Avenue in Palo Alto, and we were aiming to have a project that was functional, safe, aesthetically pleasing, and affordable. And we had 2 alternatives. One was to run the power from the home up along the eaves and down various structural elements of the home in a very visible way. And the other one was to bring it out through the under crawl space and drop it underground and run it out parallel to the building to the side of the charger. The above ground service to charger was an $8,000 contract with the electrical contractor. The underground service was $18,000. And we cringed and winced and thought, why is this? And we discovered that the National Electrical Code and the California Electrical Code both specify that a rigid metal conduit can only needs to be buried 6 inches below grade. But the Palo Alto Code, for some reason, specified that it had to be buried 30 inches below grade. So now we're sitting here with a 50-foot trench ahead of us, and in order to go down 30 inches, the contractor wanted us to open it up 18 inches. So we were looking at 7 cubic yards of material to be removed from a trench, which, if we dug it a foot deep and a foot wide, was 50 or 2 cubic yards. And if we dug it 6 inches wide, which was reasonable on a 1-foot trench, then we only talking 1 cubic yard. And the cost of that is roughly $1,000. So the larger issue here that I came to talk about is code obstacles to electrification. And I'm ignorant how many of these landmines lie out there yet undiscovered, but I'm confident that you guys, all of you, want to somehow comb through the code and find incidents like this that can pose substantial obstacles to electrification in our city.
Thank you, David. That concludes your time.
That's my 3 minutes. I think that was just what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is David C. I will now invite David C. to the mic.
Take your favorite mic.
David Cole with Carbon Free Palo Alto. Just some general comments. As I'm looking around my neighborhood, I see there's still new homes with new gas hookups being attached to them. And I know through the reach codes and everything else, we've done a lot to discourage that as best we can. But it also occurred to me that those people should be paying the full price of decommissioning that gas line because they are installing stranded assets that will be only viable for a short period of time. So it's only fair, both cost effectively for our neighbors and everybody else that they pay that full price up front. And that would also be a deterrent. If this is not a utility rate, then perhaps we can charge even more to change behavior where I think that's not allowed under Prop 26. But it seems like that would be a good thing for the SCAP to look into, further dissuade the use of gas in the city where you guys are looking at the end of gas and people are installing new gas. So at minimum includes that decommissioning cost. The other observation is that every new home that goes in has a 400 amp service. And this is way over the top too much. Even with an ADU, you can get by on a 200 amp service. And so again, it's pushing what's really needed and it's costing extra. And so those people should pay that extra cost upfront as a deterrent, as a true cost to the rest of the community. If we had to supply every new home with 400 amp service, which is way, way over the top, utilities is planning their equipment with 200 amp. These people need to pay that extra. It's not fair for our neighbors to absorb that and raise their other things. So those are my two comments in general as I walk around my neighborhood that I think would be good for this committee to look into. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any further comments?
I have received no other public comment card to speak in person, noting that we accept general public comment in person only.
Okay, thank you. Well, then we'll close public comment. All right, moving on to standing verbal reports, starting with Dr. Eccleston.
Thank you, Chair, and we do have some. So first, some updates having to do with our heat pump water heater programs. So regarding the tech incentives that we've been discussing over the last months, the most recent round of those statewide incentives for heat pump water heaters just closed with all the available incentives exhausted. And just to share, over the 4-month period for round 3, when the incentives were in place, over 100 Palo Altans signed contracts to install a heat pump or water heater through the combination of our full service, emergency, and rebate programs. And then we just wanted to highlight an area we think drives staff participation, creative outreach by our staff team over the last several months. Some of these things we've talked about, but just want to highlight again. So just a few examples, our heat pump water heater giveaway program. So we had talked about that, but I don't think we announced the outcome. And in September, we announced the winner of the giveaway contest. 24 residents installed heat pump water heaters to join the giveaway contest. And Palo Alto resident and eco hero Dolores and her family made the switch. She was lucky to be randomly chosen to receive the free water heater giveaway. And she's since told us how much her family loves the heat pump water heater, which keeps their garage cool in the summer while we are using their farm equipment. Another recent event, the heat pump happy hour. That was October 23rd at Nickel Park Library Community Center. About 40 residents joined us for the heat pump happy hour to enjoy company, refreshments, and have the opportunity to talk with neighbors who have already installed heat pump water heaters about their experiences, as well as be able to ask questions from experts that were attending. Then lastly, on this front, the refer a neighbor promotion. So also on October 23rd, the day of the happy hour, we launched this referral campaign. So how that works is that residents in Palo Alto who have completed a heat pump water heater installation are eligible to earn $50 per referral. And then the referred neighbor, if they participate in the program, receives $100 after they complete their installation. So just a little into this, as of a week ago, we had 14 customers signed up as referrers and 2 signups that were referred customers. So early in the game on that, but we're trying to share the word about that. On another, not quite as bright matter, solar and battery permit fee. So city staff has received a few emails in recent weeks with concerns about solar and battery permit fees. I think some committee members may have seen some of these as well. In the fiscal year 2026 budget, the city implemented a new cost of service study, which inadvertently did not properly adjust some of these fees that are subject to state statutory caps. So we're looking into that now. Staff is working on a solution and expects to return to city council in early 2026 to have a discussion about this. And then lastly, back to the more positive side of things, the Charging Smart Gold Standard designation. The city of Palo Alto was recently awarded the gold level designation by the National Charging Smart Program, which is a US DOE Department of Energy program. This program recognizes local governments for best practices that help to enable efficient EV charger expansion. And really, they looked at our efforts across 6 categories that they evaluate. So it's planning, regulation, utility engagement, education and incentives, government operations, and shared mobility. So really, kind of full gamut of things that can be involved in this area. And we were actually able to pretty easily achieve the highest level designation they have, which is gold, based on our robust vision, goals and KPIs, EV reach code, and streamlined permitting, rebates and technical assistance. Catch my breath there. Community events, city fleet vehicle purchases, and provision of public charging. So we just got this news, I think, in the last week and are pretty excited about this. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Judge.
Well, congratulations. Thank you. Thank you for making us proud. Thank you for the gold star. And I'm just curious. So our winner, Dolores, did you like arrive at her door like Publishers Clearinghouse and give her an award or something, or how did this go?
There actually was a big check and a post on social media with everyone holding the big check, so.
Oh, that is
very exciting.
okay. Well, nice work, eco hero Dolores, and happy. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, any comments? Pat.
Okay, so thanks for the updates. At the last meeting, or maybe 2 meetings, I had raised kind of a concern and a request that we develop a spreadsheet of essentially friction points in our programs. We have all these great programs, and then we get anecdotally a lot of feedback from the community, and we hear about, well, we address this one or that one, but we don't have any systematic place where, one, we record it and make sure that we're really looking at all of the issues, being able to prioritize them as a result versus just reacting on an ad hoc basis. Brad just mentioned one, which was the emails that we had gotten about solar and battery permitting fees. And the solution that was recognized was, we are actually non-compliant with state limits. But it begs the question, why were that high, period, whether there was a state limit or not, if there are disincentives or fee structures or disincentives to adoption. At the same time, we're spending enormous amounts on incentive programs. It seems that we're working at odds to ourselves. And So whether or not it's that particular issue will probably be resolved by complying with the state regulations, but it should cause us to reflect and say, what's wrong with this picture? But putting that on a spreadsheet, as well as what we just heard from about the solar, the conduit depth and us being supposedly in more onerous than state and federal regulation, which we'll see whether that is confirmed, but I saw staff taking down information there. And then lastly, what David brought up about observing a frequency of gas hookups on new homes, despite what we thought was going to be the outcome from our latest reach code requirements, and we had a different term. So one question would be, why aren't those codes having the outcomes that we anticipated? And lastly, the question of still seeing 400 amp services on new homes, almost by default. Is that a problem with the grid mod that we're doing and the pole mounted transformer upgrades? Are they going to be able to accommodate 400 amp services in every home if that were to happen? Versus what were we assuming would be the average service speed? And I don't know the answer to that. I know that we have greater capacity with that, but that's the sort of thing that we really want to see. And then the last thing I brought up previously, and I thought more about it and discussed it with the city manager, is this prospect of a business advisory council to really bring the business community more fully into these efforts, incorporating where they have strong, some of the companies have strong chief sustainability officers, and that can be an additional resource. It can have stronger buy-in just from the business community and input on, frankly, what in their perceptions would be needed to help them advance our goals. And then lastly, really to help us have a community identity, the city identity of what we had really pursued as an identity 15 years ago as real leaders in innovation and sustainability as the essential core values of our community and our business community. So on that last one, I don't know if that needs to be a part of a recommendation for our update or our next SCAP plan update, or how would this committee make a recommendation for that to occur? What would be the process?
Well, so we will be bringing back a draft 2-year work plan in early January.
Okay.
So I think the committee may have seen that because of some of the schedule for this year and the fact that we're holding this Saturday workshop on the SCAP in mid-December, we've actually pushed off slightly the recommendation from the committee, and this committee will meet again in January.
Okay.
In the new year to review that. So that.
Okay, if you can just capture that as at least an alternative for the committee to consider. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, just to pick up on that, I'm just curious from staff, either now or later, if we can confirm Mr. Cole's observations of these 400 amp installations, whether that's aberrant or if that's the norm, because if it's the norm, it would concern me. If not, then we have to figure out who it is that's installing them and see if we can get to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I looked at the statistics, but when I looked at them last, it was about a third of people have been putting in gas lines, and for the most part, that was stoves, as best we could determine from the information available. And last time I looked at 400 amp panel upgrades, it was a pretty small minority of people actually doing 400 amp panel upgrades. It's a lot on an absolute, not on an absolute quantity number, but it was a minority of a small minority of the upgrades that were going in.
Thank you. That's a little bit heartening, but it would be great if we could just see if that still is the case, maybe perhaps next time or something, very interesting. On the business community idea, that's quite interesting. So many companies once they get to a certain size, have these chief sustainability officers now. And a lot of them have taken the climate pledge. And so I was actually at a reception recently hosted by the climate pledge people of CSOs. Like Siemens and others, and I would bet we could get some sort of, bragging rights kind of idea going and get some cooperation there. So that's very interesting to include in our discussion of the sustainability work plan. That does feel like the right place. That's great. I wanted to report that the Northern California Power Agency, as I've mentioned, is recruiting a new general manager. So we've now, after a competitive process, selected Korn Ferry as the recruiting firm. So that's good because it's a big position and they're obviously a well-regarded firm. So I'll be meeting with them next week and as our other XCOM members to get that process going. Luckily, Randy's going to stay on for a little bit of time until we get that squared away. Also wanted to mention that the Legislative and Regulatory Committee for NCPA only meets quarterly and it's meeting in early December. And that will include reports on DC lobbying that's happening this week. I had a reason to call our legislative officer and she happened to be landing at Phelps in our way and to do just that. To talk about things such as federal hydro projects and whether we can get a completion, a deemed complete situation that might result in lower costs and rates for us here. Also the Legend Reg Committee will probably discuss options for trying again next year to get legislation at the state the large hydro users to continue to qualify for the RPS. So that'll be happening soon. Respect to the air district, at the policy technology yesterday, at a committee yesterday, we approved recommending to the board $23 million in charge grants for EV infrastructure. You were just talking about EV infrastructure. A bunch of entities around the bay, but I looked at the list and there was here in Palo Alto, multifamily dwellings, some affordable housing. I think I saw Alpha on that list. So that's a good thing, but it was clear that the demand is outpacing the infrastructure for EV chargers because and that program was even oversubscribed to the tune of 38 million. So we're hoping we can scare up some more money to help with that. And staff is focusing on use of those chargers. So it's one thing to put them in, but if you put them in places where they aren't used or maintained, so people who are operable, it defeats the purpose. So that is a focus of that program. We also received a legislative update. It's interesting in the morning up at the Air District and in the evening at Policy and Services last night about the budget information, the state budget information that was released yesterday morning. Many of you may be aware of it, but we have this projection of had a projection of like a $30 to $40 billion structural deficit for the next several years, which endangers some of the climate funding. But as of yesterday, because the stock market has been so bullish and thus income tax and cap gains and all that's been better recently, they're now projecting a mere $18 billion deficit. So hopefully that bodes well if that continues for climate funding. And I want to thank staff, and some of our utility staff is here because last night at PNS when we did the legislative guidelines review, we had the utility legislative guidelines as well so that we can triangulate and really see how those fit together and have our advocacy efforts more integrated. So I greatly appreciated that. And I think that will help the work of this committee. Just briefly, want to thank staff so much for the quick work in supporting my speaking opportunities at COP in Brazil. You guys were fabulous. The speaking notes were great, but more fabulous was the work that the city has done for years that people were really interested to hear. I know you've spearheaded this for years, staff has been working on this for years, and to be able to brag in the first instance about the horizontal levee pilot, and also about our efforts toward carbon neutrality in a different instance. And then our efforts toward having energy resilience in a third was really terrific, and really appreciate the support that I got in doing that. It was, anyone who wants to see me after, there's a lot of other things going on down there. There's a big indigenous presence and protests, which is interesting. Fossil fuel protests, serious security issues. Earlier today, a fire broke out and they had to evacuate the whole thing in the middle of negotiations. There's a lot of challenges around this particular COP. Nevertheless, it persists. We also had an opportunity to hear in a small group from Al Gore, who was very interesting, many observations there I won't go into, but there was one I found particularly interesting, where he was talking about private capital really being a way to solve a lot of the world's climate problems. Talked about how 93% of new energy installed worldwide last year is renewable. That's really encouraging. And 75% of it was funded by private investors. So that's very interesting. But it's not distributed well. Only 2% of that was in Africa. So that's exemplary of the fact that private investors don't necessarily feel safe investing there. And I think to solve this world crisis, it's nice that we can go forth and do things that are models for others. But if we can't get the capital for others to then iterate it, it's tricky to make the progress we aspire to. So there's more, and I'm happy to talk to anyone anytime about that. Oh, one last thing, there was a lot of interest in addressing AI and its energy needs and the greenness of the energy that will feed it over the coming years. So there were people, I would mention this from time to time in questions to panels, and a lot of interest from people all around the world in engaging in a conversation about how to engage with industry now so that they can bake in certain guardrails and guidelines to be as green as possible. This is not about shutting it down. They do a lot of climate modeling that helps us. But it's about, instead of asking them to retrofit at some point after we've had the conversation, to think together now about how we might appropriately build in safeguards for greener use of that technology. So that's it for me.
One follow-up.
Certainly.
On the 400 amp panel issue, I realize there might be kind of an inverse correlation between our electrification. As more homes electrify, and they either drop gas or only using it for a very limited purpose, are we actually seeing an increase in 400 amp panel requests? And so that would be very interesting, as if you get a chance to look at the latest numbers and look at the trend and see if there's any correlation between us essentially nearly mandating electrification and we're actually seeing an increase in 400 amp panels as a result. Thanks.
Okay, so let's move on to action item 1, status update on mobility work plan. Who will be the presenter for that?
I realize I didn't introduce myself earlier.
Oh.
Brad Eggleston, Director of Public Works, for the staff comments. Just want to note Rio Lowe, our Chief Transportation Official, Sylvia Starr-Lack, Manager of Transportation Planning, and Katie Huger, Senior Transportation Planner, are all here for this item today, and Katie is going to provide a staff presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Vice Mayor, Council members. My name is Katie Hoiser. I am a Senior Transportation Planner with the Office of Transportation. I'm here to provide you an update on the mobility-related items in the Sustainability and Climate Action Plan. Next slide, please. We've got a short presentation with 3 main objectives. The first one is to provide you an update on the progress we've made so far on the mobility goals and key actions. We've also got a draft work plan for the mobility work items for the 2026-2027 year. And then we're also going to invite feedback on the work items that I will share. Of the city's entire greenhouse gas emissions, more than half are due to transportation related activities. We know that to reduce transportation emissions relatively quickly, people need to be driving less and walking and biking with transit more. To that end, the SCAP includes 2 mobility goals to reach the city's 2030 emissions reduction target. I'm going to start with the second one first, which is to increase the percentage of local work trips, meaning those workers who live in Palo Alto, increase the percentage of those who commute by walking, biking, and transit from 19% to 40%. What has changed for this goal? We're looking at about 20% according to the latest census data. Looking at the first goal, this includes reducing total vehicle miles traveled by 12% by 2030 compared to a baseline established in 2019. This one, we have seen significant progress. We reported at least a 25% reduction from the year 2023 compared to 2019. This reduction is primarily due to impacts from the pandemic, namely remote work, commercial vacancies. While the city has exceeded this targeted 12% goal so far, it is likely that we may lose some of this progress as we move farther away from the pandemic. Other regional models have suggested that VMT may be increasing as more workers return to work. Thus, as we discuss methods for reducing VMT and modal shift to active transportation and transit, we are recommending focusing more on particularly those workers who have to commute every day to work. Next slide, please. This slide details some of the challenges with measuring vehicle miles traveled. We say that so far there's been at least a 25% reduction in vehicle miles traveled through 2019. That's due to the variances and methodologies by which we measure VMT. There's so many vehicles entering, leaving, driving through Palo Alto, and we don't have a system by which we can monitor each of those. The SCAP has used 2 different models by which to estimate VMT. In 2019, we did use a model developed by a consultant firm, Fair & Peers, through the Valley Transportation Authority. We have since transitioned to using Google's Environmental Insights Explorer, EIE. VTA in 2019 estimated a bit higher than that estimated by Google in 2019, but even looking at the most conservative numbers, we are seeing at least a 25% reduction as of 2023. We have not yet gotten information on 2024. Google EIE has not published this data, and they have not been transparent on when this might be published or if it will be published in the future. And staff are exploring alternatives to collect this important data. So overall, we have a limited understanding of changes to VMT since 2023, but we do anticipate that some of those wins we achieved in the early pandemic may be lost without additional work. Next slide. In recognition that we have somewhat limited success in modal shift and that achievements in VMT reduction may be tenuous, we have a lot of work to do to reach that 80% reduction in emissions by 2030. This slide describes current work items led by Office of Transportation, many of which will have or have started to have substantial implications for sustainable travel, though these impacts may not be immediate. And this table on the left side are more long-term goal efforts versus more short-term efforts on the right side. Next slide. Looking towards the next 2 years, we've identified 5 main work items that the Office of Transportation and the Planning Department are actively pursuing to directly reduce VMT and raise the percentage of local commutes using active transportation. These items are in line with approved operating and CIP budgets for the OOT. These items include achieving significant benchmarks for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure projects, including the Churchill Avenue Enhanced Bikeway Project, the South Palo Alto Connectivity Project, and the Quarry Road Extension at El Camino Park. That second one is to implement recommendations included in the micro mobility feasibility study, which will likely point towards some sort of pilot program for shared bikes and shared scooters. The third one is to develop parking pricing policy, changing the way we think about parking cars. And I do want to highlight that this, considering the current budget situation the city is facing, this one would yield revenue. The fourth work item is to maintain and modernize traffic signals to improve multimodality and incorporate things like transit signal priority. And that last one from the planning department is to implement goals, policies, and programs in the housing element, which would in particular focus on creating a housing density and land use mix to support active transportation. Next slide. So those 5 items are relatively planned, maybe having progress, but there are additional mobility items which would help to advance our sustainability goals in the near term. These would require reprioritization of those items in the slide prior, or additional staff or funding, which we do recognize may be challenging given the state of the city's budget. It will refer to column 2 that identifies additional staffing or non-salary funds needed to advance these items. Many of these tasks include advancing or accelerating work with additional full-time staff, expanding transit services to shuttle or something to Palo Alto Link. This list also includes developing a tool to better understand mobility needs from a housing growth and other land use changes standpoint. It also includes transportation demand management, as well as education or programming for adult cyclists and pedestrians. Okay. And I do want to mention that we brought this slide deck to the Climate Action Working Group yesterday and received some feedback. I'll run through some of the high level pieces quickly. There was a comment on the value of quantifying the potential of VMT reduction from the items in the work plan. The working group also recognized that telecommuting policies may be changing. We have the next slide. Was it at the end of the slide?
It looks like that is missing from the version of the deck.
Hard copy, but, you know,
Is it in the hard copy?
yeah, maybe.
You want me to hold on? Hold on.
It's the online version.
No, the online
Oh,
version.
you got it now.
No, there's slide we added.
Potential.
We got that.
Yeah, we don't have
We
the,
don't have planned items.
we don't have the feedback from the group from yesterday, yeah, but.
It looks like there may have been some last minute changes made for the slides before, after it was published. Well, sorry about that. We'll have to. Let me, what I'm gonna do here is. Jonathan. Sorry, Jonathan, I would try Assistant Director of Climate Action. Yeah, it looks like there were some last minute changes made to the slides after they were published. And we did add the feedback slide. Let me send over to the clerk the PDF with the additional slide. We'll get that up on the screen, but you have a copy of it. Maybe you can
I can walk
talk
through
through
it.
it verbally.
Sure. So this is feedback from the Climate Action Working Group with we met with yesterday. There was one comment on quantifying the potential impacts or the potential VMT impacts from the items in the work plan we just listed. The group also recognized that telecommuting policies are changing and their impacts are kind of in flux at the moment. There are several suggestions, the one including focusing on bicycling infrastructure such as separated bike lanes to create an environment by which cyclists feel more comfortable. The group also discussed the significant benefits of more people being able to live in Palo Alto if they also work there. They'll refer to Redwood City. I think they have a goal of the percentage of establishing a percentage of people who work should also be able to live in the city itself. There's general support for expanding transportation demand management services. An example was given that Stanford employees are paid not to drive. There was discussion of wanting staff to consider on-demand microtransit and self-driving shuttles. I think that was it. I think we now can invite feedback, particularly on those work plan items I listed on slide 5, I believe. Just briefly, this is the feedback we received that I just spoke to the working group yesterday. But in any case, we're looking for feedback now on the work plan items established in slide 5, as well as current level of efforts that we're taking towards our mobility goals.
All right, well, thank you very much. I want to see if my colleagues have any clarifying questions before we go to public comment, and then we can come back for discussions.
Just one.
Yeah, that's some clarifying questions. Thank you, sorry. On mode share. So what year is the baseline that with the for the like 20%?
The baseline is also 2019.
Okay, also 2019. And so is that for Palo Alto residents based on census data for people who live in Palo Alto, not for all trips to or from Palo Alto?
Correct. We're only looking at residents in Palo Alto and their commute, which may be outside of the city.
Okay. Does working from home count? Because of course, working from home, you see that in the BMT metrics as a positive tailwind, but you don't see that in the mode share. Seemingly.
So we start that transportation planning manager. So we had a whole conversation about this with Jonathan about how to capture these things in the data. For our KPIs, that we try to keep it as simple as possible. So we're trying to keep mode share just based on what the census captures, because we know that that will be captured all the time. You want to say?
Yeah, Jonathan, I'm China Assistant Director for Climate Action, and the outgrowth of that is that no telecommuting isn't included. That it's still a percentage of work trips, and so if the work trips aren't happening, then they're not counted in this percentage.
Right. Well, if there's still a percentage of work trips, they wouldn't be counted in the 19 or. Okay, interesting. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, essentially
Yeah.
the number of work trips have declined, and the percentage of mode shift for those work trips has stayed about the same.
Right, so worked from home in the census data is excluded from the denominator and the numerator. And the census data isn't particularly detailed about whether people are cycling or walking or taking the train or taking the bus. Is it, or do we have all that? Okay. Are there, I mean, I think I can expect what the mode shift change has been, but are there any notable call outs or things to confirm?
Chief Transportation Official. So I think there's a number of trends. Some of them are coming from census and some of them are coming from other places. So one of the trends is, and this was from some of the freeway data, is that they're still seeing a rebound post-pandemic in trips. Also, some of the trips are longer because people can work from home, so they can tolerate sort of a longer commute. So there's more mega commuting. So there's a number of different things that are happening simultaneously. But that would, I don't know whether that would be affecting people who actually live in Palo Alto. I think it's more the reverse direction.
Right, and so we see capturing numbers have not recovered, though, you know, they are growing rapidly. And so I would expect what, the public to be down somewhat, driving to be up somewhat, is that the?
Right, so that was in the mode share, so while the absolute numbers are lower, the mode share is kind of going the opposite direction to what we would hope, because there's less transit commuting. VTA recovered fairly well, but they're still not at pre-pandemic levels. Caltrain has made substantial improvements since electrification, but they're lower than VTA's bus numbers as well.
I think having some of that extra context on mode shift would be useful for deeper evaluation of the planned items and proposed items, but yeah, those are my clarifying questions for now. Thank you.
So first, following up on that last item, yeah, I think I would like to see those major breakdowns with the data that is on. So that would be informative. And then on table 1, we're comparing 2019 to 2023, but our goal was for our 80% reduction was based on 1990 baseline. So what are we using to calibrate the 1990 baseline? The parent peers, that was 2019, and now we've gone to the Google EIE, and I'm guessing that we didn't have the granularity that we have now, but still, what's the basis for that? The 1990, which is what our reductions are geared to.
Sorry, Christine Long, Sustainability Manager. So, to address that particular question, yes, some of our goals have a 1990 baseline, but for mode shift specifically, the baseline is 2019, not 1990.
So when we had a certain GHG level that we're using for 1990, did it not have any breakdown on mobile sources versus stationary? What was the basis for us even thinking we know what our 1990 baseline was?
So the 1990 baseline includes all of the categories in the GPC methodology. So we have on-road transportation, off-road transportation. We've now added Caltrain transportation, aviation as well. So we have that breakdown. We don't have the mode shift breakdown.
So did we have a VMT?
I'm not sure if we have a.
That seems like that would have been the basing. Since that's such a major portion of our transportation GHGs.
I think there's been a lot of evolution in how you measure the VMT and how you measure the emissions from the VMT, and even since 2019, frankly. So we're still untangling as we've gotten most of our focus for the last few years has been on improving our measurement methodologies. And now I think one of the things we're going to have to take a look at is trying to untangle our backwards comparisons, but we don't have that information for 1990.
Yeah, so I fully appreciate this is evolving toward greater granularity and accuracy. And the 1990 numbers will be a lot less reliable than the 2019 numbers, but they're still the basis for our overall goal. And to understand what we had in there, what we know and what we don't know, is still important.
The earliest VMT we have is from 2015. That is the furthest back that Fair and Peers was able to get for us at that time, because that was the only available data at that time that we had access.
Okay, well, that would be valuable to add to this table as well. but we must have had. What, I still am interested in what was used to come up with our 1990 baseline GHGs.
Yeah, point taken, and I think as our staff team, because there's enough complications about this, even in the recent years, we've been more focused on that and thinking about this 2019 baseline, but we hear your point. We don't have information today about that 1990 baseline, but we can look back and see the best we can what the basis of that was.
And then if we can see, table 1, which would be slide, well,
Let me see that slide. Yeah.
we can call it up from the report, but I was trying to understand. It's got the Fair and Pierce plus Google EIE on VMTs from 952 million down to 598, which is close to a 40% or so decline. But then the GHGs at a 25% decline, which, and then I didn't understand why those two things wouldn't
Yeah,
track.
let me speak to this a little bit. So this goes to exactly what we were just talking about, these improvements in measurement methodology. The Fair and Pierce study was an estimate based on the countywide transportation model, and which is, is based primarily on sampling. And then you have Google EIE, which back in 2019 was very much in beta mode, had a lot of errors. And so there are wide uncertainty bands around those 2019 numbers. And I think, and the other thing is that it's not just the VMT measurement that's been widely varying, it's also the ability to access vehicle data to estimate emissions from different vehicle types. So the 2019 numbers didn't account as well as we would have liked them to for medium and heavy duty vehicles. We've corrected that in our 2023 numbers, but the combination of those two different errors mean that what you need to be looking at from 2019 to 2023 is the broad directionality, and there's really significant decreases in VMT.
Again, but there's a big difference between a 40% decline and 25% decline, right in that same block. So I had been assuming that in that upper block of Fair and Pierce and Google EIE combined, that we think the EIE is more accurate. Is that correct?
No, I think what we're saying is that none of the 2019 measurement methodologies were as accurate as we would have liked them to be. We made the best estimates that we were able to make.
Well, I'm sorry, but the current EIE is more accurate. But
yes, it is.
This 293, I don't get where that number comes from.
So the 293, I think, is lower than you would likely expect for that level of VMT.
Yeah.
If you were taking into account, you would expect it to be higher if we had had the data to take into account medium and heavy duty vehicles. And we are taking those into account in 2023, but in 2019, we didn't have the information to fully take those into account. And so you would see a higher number for that VMT based on that VMT if you were incorporating medium and heavy duty vehicles.
Well, in that case, then our actual decline would be closer to that 40%.
Well, let me
25%.
But let me push back on that a little bit, because the Fair and Pierce model also has a lot of uncertainty in it, right? And so, the decline could be closer to 40%, or it could be more on the lower side, closer to 20%. There are very wide error bands on this. I think that's why you have to look broadly, directionally. The goal that we had set was a 12% reduction in VMT, and I think based on the sort of broad measurements that we have available to us, we can say that there was significant decline during the pandemic, but
I'm with you on significant decline, but in terms of getting to our overall goals as well as our transportation specific goals, settling this difference between whether we've gotten from vehicles a 40% decline or a 25% decline or somewhere in between, those are big numbers overall. And I don't know how we should reconcile it, but these two just don't seem to be reconciled right in the same block. And it's a big part of our numbers.
Yeah, that's.
I just jump in, but what I think is interesting here is, and I understand that VMT is what we can control or at least attempt to influence, and so that's why we care about it. But if you look at the GHGs, they're very, very close. So basically, and that's ultimately what we're trying to accomplish. So if you say, you know, we went from 300 million to 225 million under either mode of measuring, kind of interesting.
Well, but
Or what we
as
accomplished.
John was saying, the EIE numbers didn't include, were not so reliable in 2019. And so that's that asterisk unadjusted. So they look close, but then when you bear that in mind, I don't know what the numbers are.
Right, and it's just that there's, as you say, these big error bars around everything, but there's a couple that are clustering there, even if it's at the low end. I do appreciate the directionality, but yeah, it would be nice if we could, so that we can make a policy that understands the VMT, if that's possible.
Yeah, so we take that comment, we agree with it, we definitely want to have an agreed upon baseline. I think my understanding is that there's just an enormous amount of uncertainty about which cars entered and left Palo Alto during 2019 or 1990 or any of those years. And we have these estimating methodologies. And again, our focus has been on getting our methodology solid so that we have good tracking data going forward. But now I think that we have settled on some solid methodologies. Although one of our focuses right now is on, pushing on that Google EIE data. We still have some work to do on getting the methodologies right, because we are relying on that EIE data that hasn't been released. We did hear this week that it is supposed to be released, but no indications on when. But assuming that we're able to continue using the EIE data, we have some solid methodologies, and so then that gives us the bandwidth, I think, to start going back and looking at how to agree on what uncertain methodology we're going to use as our baseline, which was similar to what we had to do for the 1990 emissions level. We didn't, we can't go back and re-inventory.
Ultimately, we're going to have to make some best assumptions on both 2019 and going back to 1990. I just want to see them transparently out there. Here's the assumptions we made. And that's the best we can do because it wasn't great data at the time. Just to have that transparency.
Yes, we can take that.
The EIE, I wasn't aware of them. I don't remember them coming to the attention of this committee over the years. Did I miss that? Because frankly, I'm excited to see what they're offering. But I don't remember this being discussed. And part of that is what else is in there that's relevant to what we're doing. Once I saw that, I was going, wow.
What we have discussed in some of the past years before the committee became a Brown Act committee. Some of our
I remember
meetings discussing the annual greenhouse gas.
Okay. And do they have origin destination data within it? They do. I see Christine is saying yes.
I will say the reason why we ended up deciding to switch to using Google EIE for our 2022 inventory is because Google switched their entire methodology to follow the GPC methodology. In 2019, they did not follow GPC. Right. And then they decided to follow it. And once they decided to follow it, Palo Alto, along with all of the cities in San Mateo County, decided to switch to using Google EIE.
And not to mention, it's free.
Exactly.
And what, by comparison, the Fair and Peers, what do we pay for that kind of study?
So the VTA model that the Fair and Peers used, the VTA model in and of itself was $15,000.
Oh.
And then you have to add on the Fair and Peers.
Less than I might have assumed. Okay. And then on table 2, I had a couple questions. We list on rail grade separations as a way to reduce VMTs. And I didn't understand how that would work. Why would that reduce VMT?
Is that the bike pumps?
No, not particularly. So, you know, the bike tunnel in and of itself, I'm very hopeful that it would, and as we had discussions, the rail committee, I think that the location that we are tentatively exploring at near Matadero has the potential to have better yet than we were assuming, because I'm not sure that it's looking at mode shift for opening up Wallace Stanford Research Park, bike commute, particularly expanding the distance through e-bikes. But when we put a vehicular grade separation, it basically reduces traffic congestion and has an unintended consequence of potentially inducing greater car trips, because you made them easy and you're not stuck in traffic and more people drive. And so I didn't understand why we're assuming it's a reduction in VMTs.
I think that's a fair point. I think that the grade separations help to reduce VMT in that they help to address the issue of like a lack of connected network for active transportation. But I think that the point about the vehicular, like
And depending on which grade separation we design, we choose, it'll have more or less impact on the multimodal in addition to whatever impact we have on the dedicated vehicular one. And then traffic calming was listed as a VMT reduction. How would that translate into VMT reduction?
So part of what we're hoping, this is not our current traffic calming program, but part of what we're hoping to implement in the coming years is a redo of the traffic calming process so that it can provide more nimble response to community input on, you know, for example, pedestrian and bicycle concerns, reducing speeds and making those networks again.
Okay, so traffic calming that would help promote mode shift or share. Okay. And then we've got the long-standing micromobility feasibility study. And on the one hand, how effective a shared micromobility system would be in Palo Alto, unfortunately I'm kind of skeptical it would have a big impact. But the one way in which I think it might is out at the University Multimodal Center, which really serving more Stanford loaners than Palo Altans, although Stanford Hospital might be a good source. So that's the only one that I wondered, what is the status there? And Sylvia, it sounds like we're in agreement that its benefit may be overstated for our community just because we don't have those origins and destinations that lend themselves, except people arriving by train is probably one of the best ones.
Yeah, and Katie can speak more to it because she's actually in the middle of the micromobility feasibility study now, but the broad outlines of what you're saying is true. The only thing I would add is that Stanford Research Park has actually also asked us to include them in our.
Well, and that could very well be from Cal Lab Station too.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I would add that study organizing is longstanding due to limited staffing. The Safe Routes School team has reallocated to that group for a while. But the reason why we are doing the study is recognizing that much of Palo Alto may not be suitable for something like shared bikes or scooters, and our findings so far have been they will be most successful in some of the denser areas you might expect, downtown Cal Lab, but particularly with the input of or the inclusion of Stanford, the campus, the shopping center, will really contribute to the success. And then hopeful reduction of VMT, modal shelf shift that we're looking for. And we are in conversation with Stanford still on how that partnership might look like.
Good. Oh, and just response to one of George's questions, as you know, we're seeing these patterns post-COVID and the fixed rail transit use. It's not just for us. It's BTA and Samtrans are the bus services. They've pretty much fully recovered, but the fixed rail in the Bay Area is all down. Post-electrification and of Caltrain and the new schedule, seem recovery exceeding our projections. Well exceeding it actually, but still we're back up to 65, 70%. But that the other thing that you noted on the state of the economy, both hybrid work and a sluggish tech economy means just fewer people going to work, no matter which mode, and congestion drives transit use, unfortunately. That we wish we could get more people to take transit when the highways were moving well, but it's really when they move badly that more people switch to transit, and that's just a reality. Now, good thing is that those forces come together at a certain point in time, but we're not at that point in time right now. Thanks.
All right, many of my questions have been answered. I just have a couple of minor ones. So on that same slide 5 on the current Office of Transportation work items, one of the short-term items is the last one, the pilots and opportunities under study. And it lists the Palo Alto link. And so when I saw that at first in the chart in the staff report, I was a little mystified because I'm still in a vehicle traveling miles, and it's just me. But then in the verbiage in the staff report, it talked about Palo Alto link and or reinstating a shuttle. And so I just wanted to hear more about where we are on that, because the shuttle sounds more like, you know, when we're working together on a fixed route, there will be a reduced VMT, but what is the thinking there?
So we'll be returning to council with an item outlining that, but I do think that the shuttle is cost prohibitive at this point in our budget.
Yeah, so I guess I'm right, and I know both of these are, you know, under controversy as to whether and how and if we would pursue them, but I'm just trying to understand why we would be reducing VMT with Palo.
So I think the thinking there is that it's part of a package. So for example, when I was living in Sydney, I didn't have a car and I had a transportation budget. It included money for a train, bus, and at least one trip on a taxi every week.
Mm-hmm.
So it's part of that allowing people to live a car lifestyle. So to the extent that it does that, then it helps to reduce VMT. If they're, you know, generating trips that they would have been walking, then it's increasing.
I see. Let me finish. Can I finish this?
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think it's some of what I was saying actually the last night or maybe on Monday. So yeah, so that sounds like what you're saying is, so my daughter, for example, we offered to buy her a car when she graduated from college, but she's lived in urban settings, difficult to park, shared places. So she does what you just described. She, you know, takes buses, she rides trains, and she calls an Uber when she can't, or she rides with a friend. So I think what you're saying is, if she did not do that and had her own car, that some of those bus and train and shared ride, you know, couples were less likely to happen. And so it's not the link itself or the Uber itself that's reducing the VMT. It's the fact that the other ancillary trips are more likely to be on public transit or some other active mode. Is that right?
Yeah, it's part of a package. So without that ability to take those rides when you need to, maybe some of purchase a car or just drive to work.
So sort of the ancillary vehicle miles travels.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Did you want to make a further point on this?
Yeah, so I'm a little skeptical that we're seeing that from our link. I will say that in San Francisco, when at the Caltrain station, there is an army of Waymo vehicles. And so there are a lot of people, particularly at night, who would take Caltrain now because they've got ride sharing capability there, whether it's a public one and discounted like Link or an expensive one. But I'm not aware of, I never see, or seldom see Link lining up at our Caltrain stations, and so I'm a little skeptical that we're experiencing that benefit to the degree that some locations may be.
Sounds like that's what we're gonna talk about when it comes back, so thank you for that. Okay, so then the next question was on the 26-27 work plan items. One of the items there was traffic signal upgrades and timing efforts. And so similarly, when I read that, I thought, well, that helps the cars, why does that reduce? But I think in the staff report, and I just wanted to make sure I'm reading this right, it said that the upgrades and timing would be to optimize multimodal performance. And so is that right? And if so, how does that work?
I think it affects all modes. The fact that the transit is not very strong kind of diminishes the high occupancy element of this, but I think that also having the optimizing the flow of the roadways will also allow, more, less greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, so yes, less GHGs, but I thought we were just focusing on VMT, but maybe not, because if we're trying to make it easier for other modes, shifting to other modes, because bikes and peds travel and scooters travel at such different rates than cars, are we optimizing it for them? Is that the idea as opposed to cars? So it's frustrating for me in a car, but it's exciting for the person on the bike. Is that the?
Historically, we haven't optimized for bikes on our corridors. Correct?
We have done that in the downtown.
Oh, yeah,
Like signal timing, right? Signal timing on Bryant through the downtown, those 3 in a row have been optimized for bicycle traffic.
Okay, I wondered if that's what it was. Okay.
and it would be lovely to also have transit signal priority. That we're not there yet.
Got
That'd
it.
be part of it as well.
Okay, very interesting. All right, thank you for that clarification. And just finally, I wanted to ensure something we brought up, and I know Ms. Starlucky took note of this before. I thought of it when it came up with the potential additional items. The last one was adult focused bike walk and encouragement programs. I love that. And one of the things we raised was making sure we had wide enough bike lanes for 3-wheelers. And so I don't know if that's, an ongoing effort or baked into these ideas.
I mean, we try to get the widest facilities that we can, where we can get it.
Yeah, no, it's a challenge, just everyone's fighting for space, so, okay, just wanted to lift that back up. All right, great, well, if there's no other questions at this point, let's turn to public comment. Mr. Clerk, whom do we have?
Yeah. I would like to invite David C. To the mic at the moment.
David Cole with some comments on the report and the bike plan as I read through both of those. We have GHG reductions stated in the city, and the bike plan mentions it a lot, but there's no concrete numbers anywhere that I had seen. I was wondering if there's a possibility of finding out and or prioritizing some of the bike plan projects based on GHG reductions. It's the safety of the world base versus the safety of the local. They both count, so we need to make sure that's in there. Much of the savings have been from the pandemic, so I was wondering if the city's own policies are not being relaxed like they are with everywhere else in terms of work from home. That's been big wins. Let's make sure we're not losing those big wins at the city here. I don't know if the city policy has changed on the ability to work from home. e-bike promotion, maybe a rent-to-own project would be one way to reduce costs on both of these systems, on both ends, both for the user and the implementation. It seems that e-bike trials have about an 85% conversion to ownership. So it seems that an e-bike expo and or more promotion of e-bikes instead of EVs might be a more cost-effective GHG reduction scheme. Certainly the rest of the infrastructure is a lot less. And in both those things, whenever we talk about e-bike, let's not promote these throttle only e-bikes and make sure we have pedal assist only. Expand the TDM, especially the TMA program, to include existing businesses that aren't currently in that program, because the one large program has greater buying and purchasing power and for tickets and things for alternate modes of transportation. Updating the comp plan, as I understand it, so that street closures can occur, which would help with traffic calming. I think that's been a roadblock for a long time, and if that's the case, let's get that done. Then we wouldn't have things like Ross Road, and we could put in one in cheap infrastructure to do traffic calming instead of millions of dollars of other traffic calming that is questionable and a lot of residents don't like. Just in general, the numbers, as you know, in transportation are very squishy. So even though we want to get them right, it's hard to do that, and it's just the way transportation is. So thanks for all your efforts in these areas.
Our next speaker is Ken K. Ken, you may now speak.
Thanks. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thanks for the opportunity to comment. My recommendations on this discussion are that the city should evaluate any of these micromobility proposals using a greenhouse gas reduction per dollar KPI and a safety improvement per dollar KPI. And some of the peer city data shows that the city needs to support 1 to 3 full-time equivalent employees to get a modest GHG savings. So for example, Boulder has about 13 tons savings per year, Ann Arbor about the same range, 12 to 15. The one big success is Cambridge in the UK, and they have a micromobility program with a huge number of rides. And that's where it really makes sense, where you can get huge scale out of a shared micromobility program. But small scale programs, they tend to have only 5 to 20% of the trips replace a car or ride hail. And the majority of the trips replace walking or transit. So that limits the climate and safety benefits. So with Palo Alto facing probably 400,000 and more in annual staffing and operations costs, it seems like other programs should be considered, especially since the transportation staff is always pressed for more project output, and it just seems like this is one that should be deprioritized. I'd like to see other cost-effective investments like micromobility voucher programs and lending libraries. If we're going to spend money on micromobility, those are 2 programs, and especially a program where city employees could model and normalize the multimodal travel that Ria talked about. If the city does decide to go through with a micromobility shared program, it should definitely be a long-term contract, not a short permitting program that prevents the service provider from exiting and leaving the city without a service that they've invested in. Thanks very much.
To the chair, I have no other requests to speak at the moment.
Okay, great. We'll close public comment with our thanks to both commenters on those thoughtful contributions. Appreciate it. I do have to say, on the e-bike rent to own, if you try them, you might like them. That I had not ridden one, but recently inadvertently did. It was actually while we were in Brazil in between conferences, the chair and I had some time and we decided we were going to join our colleagues at go from our hotel down to like a market, where handicrafts were made. And they had Uber rental bikes, we thought. They were just ordinary bikes, we didn't know. And so we rented bikes and we get on the large bus, there's this beautiful separated bike lanes all down Copacabana Beach. And we're like, okay, this is great, it's a Sunday and they closed off one of those roads for pedestrian. But it was still a complete zoo. And as we were going, we began to pedal, and all of a sudden, we're just going very quickly. So they're quite remarkable, but once I'd ridden them, I'm like, oh, okay. We did not memorialize this in any way, shape, or form, but it is quite different once you ride them than if you never had. So I'm quite intrigued by that suggestion now that I've had that inadvertent experience. All right, with that, colleagues, who would like to start with any comments?
Sure. All right, just to confirm, we should maybe have this initially focus our comments on the planned and potential items. Is that the main direction that we're looking for? Yeah, I think like others, I can share a quick recap of what I am most bullish or bearish on and some different thoughts about potential implementation. So with regard to planned items, capital projects are great. I think micromobility is, as people have noted, does have potential to become a significant distraction. But I also wonder, it becomes a distraction if we let it. And obviously, micromobility programs can't just totally be free-range, and we would need to pay attention to their data. We would need to pay attention to their actual practices in terms of how they maintain their vehicles, depending on different models of bikes versus scooters versus docked versus dockless. Like, we could have other considerations, but it's not. I think the state of the micromobility industry has matured over the last 10 years, but it's still not obvious what kind of model could be done with the minimum staff investment, or a reasonable staff investment. And I think we'll find that out with the study, but I wouldn't necessarily rule it out or deprioritize it at this point. On downtown parking pricing and management, I am maybe just from the packet, not totally sure what the next step is here. I'm not that optimistic in the sense that we already have, at least from my perspective, excess parking capacity in our garages. And one way to drive mode shift and encourage alternative modes of transit is frankly to make driving harder. And charging for parking is a way of driving harder, but we have so much parking, at least my understanding, so many unsold parking permits and so on, that I don't really think charging or changing how we price parking is really going to make a difference. I wouldn't necessarily want our parking permits to be cheaper. I wouldn't necessarily want to encourage more driving in that sense, but I also don't really see what kind of room there is to increase parking prices. So curious if there was more to that I'm missing, or more that we should react to on parking pricing.
Is that a question?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that there is. So part of our parking policy at the moment is the color zones. And there's something known as the Palo Alto shuffle. So
Yes.
every couple of hours, like, people run out of wherever they're working, move their cars somewhere else. So it actually generates a fair amount of cruising between zones with the current situation, which is generating, emissions and safety impacts as well.
Metal bills, please.
Yeah.
Do we know quantitatively or have a sense of how big of a problem that is?
You wanna share?
Quantitatively, I don't know if we have it on that. I will say that I was in a minor tiff with a vehicle changing from City Hall, parking garage to another color zone. They were in between shifts and I was walking in the parking garage and got slightly buzzed by a vehicle going to another zone. Not quantitative, but qualitatively, it was not great. And it was a service worker working in downtown who was going to another zone to avoid paying for parking for their full shift.
Okay. I did have more comments on parking. And the angle that I was thinking was that enforcement is a way where we do not necessarily change our parking permit prices, but discourage driving or bad practices associated with driving. So I think redoing our color zones seems like it makes sense, and making sure that we can actually charge people who overstay or find. It's a way to close loopholes. Like we could say you could keep the color zones, we don't have to repaint everything, but you can only park in 2 color zones per day or something, and we can. I don't know, we have the technology, we could the vendors exist, we could find automated ways to ticket them with vehicles with cameras on them, or cameras at the garages potentially. So I'll hold the thought on enforcement. I think enforcement is a reasonable way to manage VMT and safety and mode shift. And could be an avenue to explore. Yeah, on traffic signals, good to hear that we already do things. Transit signal priorities, I think, seems to me like maybe the most impactful thing in at least the packet that we've seen. I'm also maybe not sure what else in terms of like major levers we would expect to see, like how many more streets there are that we could do walking or biking signal priority or things like that. Like besides giving priority to buses and transit, like what juice is there more to squeeze from this? Do we have a sense?
We haven't quantified that yet.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure it can help, but maybe I'm not sure it can help at a citywide scale. And on the housing element, I think I was also a little bit confused. It seems like our housing element commitments are to some large extent what they are, and that there are like, mode shift improvements we can do on San Antonio, other corridors, but yeah, I don't really understand what that like fifth work item is. I think overall for me, I wouldn't necessarily discount any of these planned items, but good execution on bicycle and pedestrian capital projects seems likely the most impactful. And I think the other things, it's more about scoping the right angle to do a micromobility actual launch sooner than later with a reasonable staff commitment, or scoping so that we can have enforcement or other ways to manage downtown parking without totally changing like without, I don't know, repainting every zone or something like that. And yeah, I'm just not as sure about the other ones. So I know that was a lot. I think I can probably stop talking and maybe we can talk about potential additional items separately.
Yeah, thank you. We're gonna have to figure out our time situation in the event, because it is 3:30 and this is scheduled to go till 4. I don't know if staff has any flexibility to go beyond that.
Staff is okay till 4:30.
Okay, have a hard stop then as well. So let's try to see if we can wrap this item and see if we can do our other one in an hour. That'd be fabulous. So are you good for now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll try and rattle through mine pretty concisely. On downtown parking, unfortunately, I don't think now is the time to be able to implement paid parking throughout the downtown. It's something we've debated forever. Most cities do have it more than us. One thing that for those who don't know, that when we increase the long-term parking permits, that's how we developed a sustainable funding source for our TMA. And once parking demand recovers in the downtown, then I think we relook at the policies, but for right now, I don't think there's the demand that allows us to really do a lot of changes. Ken Kirshner's point about really looking at GHG reductions per dollar. I know that we've done that in other areas. I think that combined with David Cole's comment on really a greater focus on e-bikes, including cargo and three-wheel e-bikes, particularly for seniors who then can continue biking, I think is under-tapped. We actually did have an e-bike expo here 2016 right out closed off Hamilton, and it was pretty popular then. I suspect it could be even more so now. On the GHG reductions for the different upcoming measures, I recommend that we try and put ranges because certainly we don't know a number, but we might have a high and a low. And then at the higher level on our goals, based on what we've seen on the VMT reduction exceeding expectations, much of that is based on hybrid and remote work, but a portion of that's going to stick. I know that 3 years ago, we thought it was all going to go away quickly, and it hasn't. And it is trending toward more in-office work, but we're going to have a lot, long-term, we'll have a lot more remote work than we did pre-COVID. And so I think that we should be realistic on adjusting our mode shift goal downward, unfortunately, and our VMT reduction goal upward. And I wish that wasn't the case, but we're still getting gains. When we look at mode shift, going back to Patman, I see Justine is here. On that value per dollar spent, I'd be really interested in their programs out of that mode shift, getting transit use. This is one of the few ways that we really do get greater transit use. In Palo Alto, not just through the TMA, but through our whole range of transit pass programs over 25 years of what we've been doing Stanford to do and our own efforts. We are the model for the Bay Areans. And at Caltrain, we have the Caltrain City Partnership Program, which hopefully everybody has seen, but it basically looks at all the different ways that you can drive transit use implementation. We tried to look for any other city that was doing any of the things we were doing, so it wouldn't look like it was just the Palo Alto model, but they're all pretty much all things we're doing. And it's a discussion we're having at MTC, because since we've adopted transit-oriented development, now transit-oriented communities, we've seen a high percentage of all development in the region is transit-oriented. But even pre-COVID, we were seeing a decline in transit use. And so really understanding what are the other drivers, which I believe are a lot of it is access to transit through physical access and passes. And that's where we're actually very successful, and part of the reason why we're the #2 Caltrain station, and it's underappreciated elsewhere. So looking to continue to invest in those areas, I think that's where we continue to win. I heard that we're, on the mode share shift Sylvia, did you say we're only looking at Palo Alto residents and not commuter mode share shift?
Yeah, that's right, because of the need to have a stable metric.
Are you saying that there's no way to get the data on commuters or what? You say a stable metric, or just that we didn't do it before and therefore we don't want to do it going forward?
I might need Christine to help me with this, but in our discussions about how to track mobility, we needed a metric that we knew was that we could track year over year. And census data on commute mode to work is stable. In order to do the estimates for what people are doing, commuters coming in, you'd have to use the VTA travel model. At the time, Google EIE was not available, but even Google EIE probably does not give us the data around in commuters and people going out. So do you have a better metric for tracking? We've been struggling to try, how do you track this? And I'm not sure, maybe Mountain View did something.
No, I think it was similar.
Okay, so we have a data collection problem. And so I'll acknowledge that, but I don't want to give up on this. This should be a category that we are really trying to identify, even if we have some categories that are less accurate than others. We don't want to leave it off the map just because we don't have as good a means of tracking it. So I don't know that we won't try to resolve that, but I don't want to leave it out of our considerations. And what's possible there, the example that is a model that since Copenhagen became a biking city 30 plus years ago, and they weren't always as much as like Amsterdam. Out of incoming commuters as of a decade ago, 50% were bike commuting. Unreal in their climate. One other improvement on kind of the mode shift, that maybe it's on the margins, or the improvements we plan to do at the University Avenue Intermodal Hub. One note on, we're talking about the impact of new residents. The 70% of our residents work outside of Palo Alto. And so a premise that new residents mean that we eliminate those commutes is one that has been promulgated, and it's really fallacious. We should do a proper calculation based upon whatever assumptions, whether new residents would continue to be 70% working out or not, and the comparative distance of current commuters versus those. Presumably they'd be shorter commutes to their outlying. They're not coming from Danville or whatever. But it's I think our average incoming is 20 to 25 miles, and the outgoing might be 10 to 15 or something. I think that that covers all my points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just briefly say that I also like the idea of adding, to the extent possible, the greenhouse gas numbers, the reduction numbers to the various elements, just so we can see how we're doing on that with these various measures. I also agree that I'm not inclined toward the downtown parking pricing, policies. Worried about some unintended consequences with respect to our retail community, and just would want to thoroughly investigate that. And then you get into a big thing, and I don't know if that's worth all the effort at this point. Because there's a lot of mixed thoughts on that. I'm intrigued by this traffic signal timing effort for the other roads. of transit, so I do like that. And I think mostly, you know, I do appreciate the efforts here, generally concur. I do like the encouragement program, as we discussed, reinvigorating it, it's done before. I think e-bikes have changed a lot, and/or people's awareness of them. But I think generally, in terms of trying to encourage a mode shift, yeah, there's habit, yeah, there's a lot of factors, but I do think that the sense of safety is significant, and I think that both, you know, feeling the degree of protection around biking for pedestrian transport, but also if, for physical or other reasons you want to use, you know, an e-bike or do something, there's even an additional level of safety and security angst. I certainly felt it in my little first foray there. And so I think sort of exposure, encouragement in safe environments and letting people become accustomed to these alternatives might help us. That said, I agree with Councilmember Burt that we may have been a little too ambitious on our mode shift numbers and goals, and may be tricky to reach those. So I think just sort of acknowledging that now is something we ought to do. So that's Lisa. All right. Well, thank you very much. Really, truly appreciate this. It's an important part of our work. So thank you for being here today. All right. Okay, so we'll move on to our second action item. With respect to the evaluation of local energy resources to lower costs and improve reliability and resiliency. The report to complete the RRSP strategies 4 and 5. I'll turn that back to staff.
Thank you, and Assistant Director of Climate Action, Jonathan Abenshine, has our presentation.
Hi, Jonathan Abenshine, Assistant Director of Climate Action. In the interest of time, I will keep this presentation very short. So this study is part of the Reliability and Resiliency Strategic Plan that addresses strategies 4 and 5. Can we get the next slide, please? This is the agenda. These are the objectives for the day. I won't dwell on this. Next slide, please. But the overall objective of the study was to look at flexible energy technologies and efficient electrification. Flexible energy technologies being solar, batteries, demand response, vehicle to grid, and similar technologies, and efficient electrification being circuit sharing, smart panels, and similar things that reduce peak load. And the effects of all these technologies on utility electric supply costs, whether we could defer distribution system investment using these technologies, and then their effect on short and long-term resiliency. Next slide, please. This shows the timeline. We've had a lot of discussions about this topic early on before the adoption of the SCAP and the work plan. And in the work plan, we included a work item to complete the reliability and resiliency strategic plan. We had a general assumption in that plan that it was worthwhile to promote these technologies for voluntary adoption and to reduce barriers, permitting, utility rules, and so on. But we weren't sure whether it made sense to put incentives in place or more intensive programs to drive adoption of these technologies. And so that's what this study's about. We've had several meetings over the course of this year and input last year as well on the scope and preliminary results, with the primary body focused on this study being the Utilities Advisory Commission. And over the summer, both this committee and the Utilities Advisory Commission reviewed the preliminary study results and provided some feedback on potential policy direction, and that's all summarized in the report and has all been incorporated into the study. Next slide, please. The overall findings from the study was that just based on the savings to utility supply costs and the benefits of short-term reliability of these technologies, there weren't any that had a positive cost benefit. In the final study, we've updated the numbers to take out the investment tax credit, which has hurt those numbers even more. There were a few areas for sort of a case-by-case focus. Certainly time of use rates are beneficial, and definitely worthwhile to continue to promote these, reduce barriers, and provide low-cost technical assistance. There was we also did a preliminary study that did not show any potential really to defer distribution investment using these technologies. So we're thinking not doing additional work on that. And then there was some interest in looking at long-term resiliency and having additional discussions on that as an additional value that might make certain types of projects worthwhile. So we have included in the staff recommendation to come back in 2026 on that topic. We'll just go through the next two slides very quickly. Can you show the next slide, please? So these are the updated results. And again, not a positive cost benefit. Next slide, please. Commercial gets a little bit closer. Next slide, please. This summarizes the feedback on the straw proposals. All of this feedback was integrated into the recommendations we're bringing to you tonight, but I do want to just call out one item. We were asked to project how technology costs might decrease in future years. And can I get the next slide, please? This is what the consultant came up with their best forecast estimates. And it does show, even without the ITC, commercial batteries and solar becoming more cost effective in the next 5 to 10 years, whereas residential solar and batteries has a much longer time before it becomes more cost effective. So those are the timelines on which we're going to be reevaluating. Next slide, please. We did talk to the working group yesterday, and we had several clarifying questions on the report methodology. There were different comments. There was one comment agreeing with the staff recommendation and recommending continuing to focus on the adopting efficient electrification technologies, reducing barriers. And then there were several suggestions. For example, considering adjusting the staff recommendations so commercial battery only projects are also considered case-by-case basis. And that was a change to the wording of the staff recommendation, which currently says solar and batteries as opposed to solar and or batteries. And there's a suggestion to do an annual update to the cost benefit where you just adjust the electricity costs. We were recommending a biannual where you adjust everything, but there was a suggestion that if electricity costs are changing rapidly to data centers and things like that, we might want to look every year at just that variable. And then there was a proposal, and I believe the email was forwarded to you on this, about trying to quantify long-term resiliency, not by doing a macroeconomic analysis, but actually doing a scenario analysis on how it might save the city directly. For example, less need for emergency shelter provision, things like that. That's included in the comments that were forwarded to you. Next slide, please. So this is the staff recommendation. We're asking you to recommend to accept the report attached to the staff report, and then a number of items of asking council to direct staff to essentially continue to work on reducing barriers, promoting these technologies, and looking for case-by-case opportunities as they arise. Next slide, please. And then update the analysis periodically and continue on that, do that additional discussion on long-term resiliency in 2026. That's it.
Great, well, thank you. Really important stuff to be smart about. how we move forward, so appreciate it. I think we'll, yeah,
Sorry, Chair, can I add one quick point
Please.
just to the end of that? That even though this is a recommendation to council and that typically recommendations coming out of committee, if they're unanimous, go to council on consent. When this item goes to council, it will actually include an item that was pulled from consent regarding the reliability and resiliency strategic plan. So it's already planned to go as an action item, probably as one of the earliest ones, 2026.
that's the KPIs one, remember that. Great, so let's take public comment first.
So Chair, I've received no requests to speak at the moment. If there's anyone on Zoom that would like to speak, I would invite you to raise your hand now. Or anyone in the room to submit a card. There is none.
Seeing no hands, we will close public comment. Thank you for that.
Yep.
Okay, all right, let's just do questions and comments together, as we'll see if we need to go more than one round. George, do you-
One question to start, can you help me think about how utility owned or larger scale battery storage solutions might come in here, like using some of the shipping container sized batteries that you sometimes think about and put them at substations or putting them at other locations in the grid. That's not explicitly considered study.
Can we put the slide back up, and then I'm looking for slide. Let's see. Slide 7, please. I would invite the utilities team to come up and add their thoughts, but while that was not explicitly considered, we have a pretty good proxy for it in the commercial results here for battery only storage systems. So these would not be quite as big as utility scale. But you can see that a lot of the value there is in the short-term reliability, and that's a value to the customers. If you wanted to do this at a substation or at utility scale within Palo Alto, tackling how to get the short-term reliability value would be a pretty sticky challenge because of all the switching and switching that would have to go on because the sort of scale of battery storage that you could do wouldn't necessarily be enough to run an entire neighborhood.
Right.
You know, so and there would be a lot of picking and choosing about who actually gets the value. So for the utility supply benefit, you would get that value, but you would need much lower cost than I think you would likely get, even if you scaled it up a little bit more. So you can get a pretty good sense of where the value would be. And I also just want to emphasize that those batteries, they are standalone batteries, so they don't provide long-term resiliency. They only provide short-term outages over a few hours within a day. That's what they might, if you were able to solve the switching issues, that's what they might be able to provide.
Right. That was my understanding as well. So in the short term,
Please.
Oh, yeah.
I really would, I see we have our director of electric engineering and operations, and I think Terry Crowley, and I think, and provide correct anything that I said relevant that.
No need for correction. Terry Crowley, the Assistant Director of Electric Engineering and Operations. So what I would kind of echo and emphasize is, yes, we could look at that from utility scale. The battery technology right now is short term. So again, 4 hours, 6 hour windows, you're not going to need a lot there. So it largely becomes an arbitrage on finance of how are you mitigating your resource adequacy cost? And how are you shaping your peak demand with the market? And then again, as you know, an integrated utility have the full opportunity to look out at the wholesale market and look at scale of economy and larger projects and engage at those larger projects as disparate within the UK to look at that economics. So if we look at economics, we know larger projects outside the city as well as the benefits of having a project internally. But I don't think the benefits of economics are largely economics just on that financial arbitrage is there. Now, if you're looking at reliability or something else into that equation, those numbers or the benefit to cost ratio may change appropriately.
Yeah, that makes sense, and definitely understand those trade-offs there. I think we've discussed that before, but it's interesting just to confirm, I guess, that we are considering short-term reliability benefits in this slide, we are considering short-term reliability benefits over a couple of days or something, or a day for a facility, and that the benefits don't scale well when you're just mitigating a 10-minute outage or 2-hour outage. I'm guessing that's just the baseline that we're working from, that it's more valuable for one customer to have electricity for a day than for many customers to have an extra 10 minutes or an extra hour of electricity.
I mean, it's more complicated than that, right?
Right.
Because you may not even be able to run a large number of customers for 10 minutes because of the complexities of the switching and the ability of the battery to actually even run those customers. It's not, it's
Okay.
it's even more complex than that.
Okay, right. I mean, calculating the short-term reliability benefits of many for a few versus a few for a long time, and also the technology complexity of switching. Yeah, definitely understand how that's one, a hard engineering problem, and also a difficult weighing problem to actually study. I think that could be also in scope to reevaluate every several years. But beyond that, I found that the results in the study generally make sense, that it's in a difficult spot to directly subsidize or incentivize, though, of course, we should also look at code level ways to make all of these processes easier. And develop the related ways to make all of these things easier. So those are my comments. Thank you.
So first, looking at this slide and the on the commercial benefit, and then slide 9 that showed the future trends, that's pretty encouraging. That already for commercial solar plus battery is a pretty good bet for the commercial customer, especially if they place the value on the resiliency. And when we don't really know how much value they place on that, but we do know that on the residential side, if you look at slide 6, we've got a fair gap between the actual supply cost benefits. That's not with arbitrage either that they're doing right now, but we get a little bit of that if we have the variable rate pricing, right? But we're seeing the vast majority of our solar installations coupling it with battery, even though the economics don't show clear benefit. And I know a few years ago, we had a staff report that basically said, well, there's no reason to do it because the economics don't do it. And yet we were seeing the market responding a different way because households were saying, I want that reliability. To what extent that is in the thinking on the commercial side, I don't think we know well, but that could be one of the things that we might have input from this Sustainability Council. John, do you have any sense of?
Well, just the one thought on the commercial side, while the cost benefit is there, when commercial businesses are going to invest working capital, they want a 2 to 4 year payback. And so that is not if you go to slide 7, that's what you're seeing there is not a 2 to 4 year payback. That's a 15 to 20 year payback.
Okay, but
so
that's
financing is something that probably would need to be a major part of. So,
but that's without
over the hump with those.
That's without being able to quantify what value they place in the reliability.
It includes estimates of the short-term reliability. You can see in the chart the light green. Those are estimates of short-term reliability value that we would expect commercial businesses to be the way that we would expect commercial businesses to value short-term reliability. Long-term resiliency is not included in this study, but short-term reliability is.
And how do we derive that?
So that's there's a whole section in the consultant study on this. They used they looked at a few different models. We got feedback from the UAC on the models, and they settled on what's called the interruption cost estimation model. And we do have our consultants on the line today. I forgot to introduce them. We have Bureau Happold here. And I would like to invite Nathaniel Gunderson to speak on the ICD model, please.
Sure, yeah, I can speak to that. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so as Jonathan was saying, we reviewed a few different models, and that model is based off of several different mass surveys that estimate both residential and commercial estimates on the potential impacts of outages over varying durations. The residential side is based on kind of a willingness to pay. So, individual customer characteristics that determine the value they ascribe to an outage of a certain duration. And then on the commercial side, those values are assigned based on different types of economic sectors and based on their cost models and what the hit to their revenue is if an outage occurs and they can't generate income during a certain period of time. The challenges with those models is that their accuracy begins to kind of you generate a certain level of uncertainty past the 16-hour mark, and generally after you're past a day of an outage, there are a lot of other indirect costs that are distributed throughout the economy that most experts in this space often requires more extensive macroeconomic modeling to really understand the true costs. And oftentimes those individual customers alone, there are other impacts to their business that generally the reason that we didn't include this estimate is because those models just don't provide a good estimate on what those costs would be. So that's kind of a rundown of why we centered on short-term reliability benefits here. And the study does have some description of that in further detail, but again, we excluded it just because of the level of uncertainty around that kind of long-term resiliency consideration.
And the model, just adding to this, the model is based on a whole variety of surveys of commercial customers and actual studies of the impacts of outages on things like productivity and spoilage and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll also just add that interruption cost estimator is developed by the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. It's peer reviewed. It's been consistently updated and was recently updated this past year. So, at this point in time, we think it's probably the best tool used to estimate those kinds of values.
The component that I'm still interested in is, in addition to that objective, quantifiable benefit, is what's the subjective and emotional reasoning. And in the residential side, people aren't doing it for the objective financial reasons. They're doing it on an emotional basis, much more so. How much that carries over on the commercial side, I don't know. I would assume less so, but I think it's still real. And I just want to make sure that we're looking at the real patterns versus the anticipated ones that tend to be, well, these are the decisions that we should have as economic objective economic decisions when we actually in economics have a lot of emotional decisions.
Can I speak to that for a second? We are actually well set up to let people bring whatever level of qualitative interest they have in solar and batteries into their decision making. Because we have our net energy metering program, we have our Palo Alto clean feed-in tariff, And those pass the utility value, the supply reduction value directly through. The reliability and the resiliency value, those accrue to the customer. And so if they're willing to spend, that utility value does not cover the entire repayment of the upfront costs. It just doesn't. But if people are willing to pay extra, pay higher than they would just for getting power from the utility, because you're gonna get that short-term reliability and long-term resiliency value, they can do that. And each individual building owner can make that choice on their own. That's the situation we have them. So we're well set up for that.
And then, one thing on the microgrids, and I was glad to see that the airport location was recognized as a possibility. Was the UAC briefed on kind of that microgrid possibility and the not only the trend toward electrification and aviation, but our adjacency to our wastewater plant, how we value the system?
Yes, they were. They received the same briefing as this committee.
Okay, thanks. I'm good.
All right, thank you. And just to make sure I was tracking that conversation, because I had much of the same sort of curiosity, I guess, about the residential results, and particularly if we take solar plus BESS. And we see the program and customer costs, we see the supply cost benefits, but there's no resilience benefits there at all. And is that because we can't measure them well, or because we don't have spoilage and the same kind of issues that commercial does? Because I think that could be where some of this comes in.
I'll ask Borough Hatfield to confirm, but my understanding is it's there. It's just very, very small.
That's correct. You can kind of see a small sliver, but they do tend to be smaller relative to commercial customers, just because the costs are much higher associated with business losses. And so yeah, generally in these estimates we were seeing pretty small values relative to the other supply cost benefits within the study. They're not invisible, but they're there, but just quite small relative to everything else.
Is that because, spoilage in my freezer is tiny? And we're looking at objective measures as opposed to the comfort I have that I can maybe keep the lights on for an hour until it, comes back?
Yeah, and it's also just part of what the data that was collected through these surveys and what people were, expressed. And so there is that, emotional side in there, like mentioned earlier. They are including their preference for comfort and those types of things. And, those may evolve over time, but this survey data has been tracked for the past 2 decades. So it hasn't changed that drastically in terms of the variation in values that you're seeing. It's quite consistent.
And I can speak to this a little bit too, I think, in that, the people who are buying solar and batteries because they're working from home and also they just really want to spend the money to protect against it. And they're concerned about the long-term resiliency. So that's number one, is that long-term resiliency is not factored in here. And I do think that's probably a bigger consideration in the residential area, that emotional safety of being able to get through an earthquake and still be able to power some things is really important. And that's not reflected up there. And I think it does fill up a lot of the dashed lines. That short-term reliability, I think you do have the number of people who are buying, you have to remember that the number of people who are buying solar plus batteries is actually relatively small compared to the total population in Palo Alto. And so I think it has high valence because we talk to these people and we hear the stories, and we put a lot of weight on that, but there's so many people who are just not doing it. And I can just speak anecdotally and personally as someone who doesn't mind a 2 or 3 hour outage. I can live with it. I can live with a 12-hour outage. I'm not someone who's likely to buy solar and batteries for that purpose. But and so I think the needs average out with the people who really do need to have that.
Yeah, so that explains why we have trouble seeing the light green line, but I think you're right. If we're not capturing long-term resiliency here, I think that could make up a significant portion of that. empty box. Okay, interesting. So with respect to the four, items in this. There's no one. In the staff report, actually the categories, I guess it's five, on the recommendations for implementation. Private use, great. Could you remind me of them? Am I just imminent, right?
I believe there's only, between 5,000 and 3,000 meters remaining for that, so largely it's deployed. And the data is starting to be available.
That is great. Okay, well, I'm delighted about that. On the technology promotion and barrier reduction, I do think that's important. People don't want to feel stupid. They don't want to buy the wrong thing or have to ask too many questions. You just feel dumb when someone shows up at their house and they don't know how to respond. So I think doing the various things to encourage adoption are really important. Although some of these things felt like they're things we would do versus things a consumer would do. So, grid technology upgrades versus demand response, for example. So I was a little confused about this collection of things under item 2, technology promotion and barrier reduction.
Sorry, some of that has to do with the comma.
Okay.
The commas in 2B, so vehicle to load, vehicle to home, and vehicle to grid technologies.
Okay, that's right. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
So like that. Yeah.
All right, let's see. Grade school teachers knew we really needed to know that stuff. Okay, that makes good sense, but I do think that's an important thing to keep doing. I was just curious on for basically monitoring opportunities for the city for solar and battery at the IWQCP at the treatment plant, talking about solar. How much would or could that contribute? Is that kind of like the Sherman Garage solar over to the PSB, or is it entirely different concept? Since I learned about that on Saturday.
Well, the solar concept that we've been investigating, having to do with the potential microgrid, was a solar system at the airport that would be connected through a microgrid to power the water quality control plant. So are you talking about the solar potential for the regional water quality control plant itself? That I don't think she's like that. He's not strongly at.
Yeah, so I was new to me and I was just curious about it. So, I mean, I think that all of these creative efforts are helpful. They're still not helping. But yeah, I was curious about that one. Let's see what comes up. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm looking at the
And next slide. Sorry, we're gonna end up jumping back and forth.
Yes, it talks about staff will also continue to explore backup power needs at RWQCP and airport to determine the most economically used backup. So I think that's different than the airport solar to power airport system, backup over the air.
Sorry, where are we looking?
I'm looking at staff report, page 11, item 4, entitled Commercial Facility Partnerships.
Yes.
Evaluation.
Yeah, so I think that was, that was subsumed under the case-by-case evaluations. And I'm sorry, which page was it again?
Page 11, item 4.
Yeah.
It sounded like two different things, backup power for the RWQCP and backup power for the airport, but we could be in a grammar problem again.
Well,
Yeah.
I think I would say that as we investigated the larger microgrid idea that was studied as part of the big study we're reporting out on, we had this idea that a microgrid could potentially provide backup power, regional water quality control plant. Backup power there currently is diesel generators. And as we looked at that, we weren't too pleased with the outcome in terms of the length of time we have power and the vulnerabilities there in terms of availability of diesel fuel and our capacity to bring it there in the event of some kind of significant emergency.
I see.
So that's why, really irrespective of the microgrid idea, we have an interest for the water quality control plan to take a closer look at what we need.
I see, so to have a backup. It's nice that it's also solar and, but the point, one of your primary motivators was to have a backup for the diesel. Backup.
Right, which also might mean having a better plan for how we make sure we can provide the diesel that we need and a plan for metering its use. Prioritizing it for only the most critical things. If we
Right.
found ourselves, say there was a major earthquake. And we might not be able to bring in significant new fuel, say, for a week.
Right,
Locally too.
right, so there's sort of a resilience and dependence issue.
Yeah, the reason it was important to look at all backup options is that the solar and storage meter pump is very expensive.
Yeah. Yes, I recall that, okay, thank you. Item 5 that follows that in the staff report, microgrids and long-term resiliency. I was quite intrigued and liked this idea about these alternative policies, providing incentives for solar and battery microgrids at private facilities, such as grocery stores, things that are important in emergencies. I had not thought about that before, but I think that is interesting. So, I mean, generally you're asking about, essentially discontinuing a lot of these incentive programs. I think you're on the right track here. I don't think that's the way to go. I think these analyses are better. But there are certain alternatives, and I think you're right. In an emergency, there are certain entities, and like grocery stores. And I also appreciate the income qualified incentives as well. So those two, I think, are worth continuing to explore. So thank you for that. I was glad to see that in the attached report that the concept of deferring distribution investment did not really pencil out, because that was making me nervous, and I'd rather not defer that investment in the grid upgrades. I think that we're glad we've done it once we have. And I think that is good, and I'm glad that our council is going to be discussing microgrids. So I think is what I have. So what else do you need from us? If anything, today?
We were hoping for a recommendation to council, or
Right.
a staff recommendation.
Okay, but you guys, for some feedback, you want to think of a.
Well,
Additional
a motion with that recommendation.
Yeah, no, I understand though. but I was-
Other than that, I think the feedback.
Yes.
That's what
we
I'm
do
asking.
have- Yeah,
Okay,
feedback is
that's-
very helpful.
All right, do you have anything else before you go to a motion? Either of you?
No, I just want to make sure I understand, that in the staff report was really asking whether we want to take more aggressive approaches. We have two options.
There was one alternative option.
Right.
That was, to go actually further, than promotion as staff time is available, and actually dedicate additional resources to more aggressive outreach, and that did require additional. I'm just going to the fiscal impact section. We would have to come back and talk about we'd have to scope that out and come back with the additional staff time that would be needed.
I mean, the first alternative said really, kind of as opportunities present themselves kind of approach.
Right.
Versus the second is really to promote these things. And I am interested in us pursuing the second.
Yeah, I found the location that it's in the fiscal impact section under the second bullet on page 8. And it was looking at a half FTE hourly budget. And Yeah, that's about the level of effort that would probably require.
And would this, any of this be from utilities versus general?
We would need to come back and find a funding source.
Okay, so I would like to move the optional alternative to recommendation 2B. As noted in the staff report and with an understanding that the half FTE funding source would need return upon greater valuation.
Can I just ask, I'm not seeing what you're referencing on page 8, staff report.
Yeah.
There's no pagination.
Or is it?
It's the second set of bullet points, midway down the page, promoting demand response.
Yes, promoting demand, yeah, the bullet that starts with promoting demand response. So
Oh, it's the one I have. Are you in the attachment?
Yes.
Ah, okay, I was in the staff report.
This is,
on page 2 of the staff report.
it's right here. That's the optional alternative on page 2, but this right.
Oh,
here
sorry.
in the staff report.
Attachment on the staff report.
It is in the staff report.
Yeah.
So what? Okay, so if you get past the staff recommendation.
Scroll basically to the bottom.
Yeah, which sort of starts, when I was looking at the like, plan A, as staff, as opportunities, and then look at the more aggressive one. That's where I was, and then I went back.
Seven of the staff report is where I think I'm seeing it.
Response and then into the higher level of this side.
But page 7, I think, details.
It's packet page 12.
Yeah, I know, thank you. So these are the resources that are required for the standard one, or these are, you're telling what the upgrades are?
So it's a little bit tucked in there, so it's
Oh,
the,
I see.
yeah, I'm sorry about that. So it says the recommended actions above require resources as follows. You go to the second bullet, and the third sentence in the second bullet talks about the half FTE hourly.
Okay, and so that would be for the promoting demand response, but there are quite a few.
It covers all of the different flexible technologies and efficient electrification.
Okay, because I was also interested in one of these others. Oh, I think it's what George is asking, and I think Pat's asked from time to time, and I'm interested. The here, I don't think it says what the additional is. So this is bullet second from last from the bottom. Evaluate large-scale solar and best opportunities in Palo Alto, either publicly owned facilities or through partnerships with private landowners. I think it's unlikely, I think one of our biggest issues is finding space, right? Like where would we put this stuff? It's big. But I don't know. It says here, staff would restrict these efforts to 0.1 to 0.2 FTE. And so but there's no sort of upgrade akin to the one we were just discussing, is that right?
That's true, and it's because we're seeing such a very slim cost benefit that going out and trying to seek out these projects is.
That's for the switching reasons you described earlier.
For the switching reasons. Oh, that was it. That was around utility scale. Were you referring to utility scale projects?
It's used in both contexts, and so.
Yeah,
Okay. Then we'll separate that out.
yeah, let's separate the two. So we don't actually have any resources, I think, really allocated to utility scale local storage right now, right?
That's okay, but
And I see nodding from our assistant director.
that's, yeah,
But as far as commercial, we're really waiting for someone to come to us and, as we talk, and we talk regularly with our large major facility owners. And if one of them pops up and says to us, we really want to get a solar and storage microgrid sorted out, well, then we'll sit down and we'll do the analysis and see if there's a potential partnership there. But we're not going to really push that as an option. We really want to do analyses with every owner that we can find, really
Yeah,
push people who aren't that interested, because we need them to have that emotional.
I got you. I'm on board with that. And so that's why, so okay, we don't need to do anything additional. And I know at the utility scale, we have probably projects there. I think it's in SoCal that they're buying into. So, okay, all right. So you need a second for your motion. So let's see if I want to add anything. Right, I'll go ahead and second that. Any further discussion? All right, let's vote.
Councilmember Burt,
Yeah.
Chair Binker,
Yes.
Councilmember Loop,
Yes.
motion carries 3-0.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Really appreciate you guys sticking around. I know the utilities folks have been up here longer than you planned, and you heard a lot about mobility. So thank you so much. All right, future meetings.
Future meetings, a couple coming up in December. So Friday, December 12th at 1:30 our regular time. Right now, we're planning a review of city facility electrification and an update on sea level rise adaptation planning. Then the very next morning, Saturday, December 13th, we have what's planned as a 4-hour workshop. We're titling it right now, Workshop on Economics of Large Scale Community Electrification Challenges and Innovative Strategies for the Single Family Sector. So while this is formally a Climate Action and Sustainability Committee meeting, it will be formatted as a workshop to allow more community member participation. There'll be a facilitator, breakout sessions, opportunities for group collaboration, and lunch. So we hope to get a lot of participation there.
In our working group. Will be here.
I certainly hope that.
Okay.
We expect them to be
You do, I missed that. We used to be.
So that's
all the time.
from when to when?
Saturday, December 13th, 9 AM to 1
Mitchell Park,
at Mitchell Park, El Palo Alto. Okay.
Thank you for organizing all of that. We'll look forward to it. I'm describing it for something I wanted to ask you about.
Said 9 to 1.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll look forward to that. Thank you for all that planning and, anything further?